Welcome to episode 16 of House Rule, a podcast about role-playing. I am your host, Ed.
I'm Ebo.
I'm Lee.
This is Jeff.
And once again, we are joined by special guest...
Rory?
Yeah!
Yay! Clap, clap, clap.
Guys, don't make claps with your mouth.
Don't make it awkward.
That's weird in here.
Well, since it's already awkward, we should just launch right into our first cavalcade of role-playing excellence.
Whoa. Who gave you permission to use that word?
It's a cavalcade of award-winning topics for this episode, I would say.
Definitely. We have some really good topics.
For our first subject, we have been participating in a RPG blog carnival on our website this month, which it's our first time, but I think that we're probably going to be doing this every single time we get the chance because it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome. We actually have a link to the blog carnival.
It's not just a Halloween thing, right?
Not as far as I know.
Carnivals, I don't know.
But yeah, basically a bunch of RPG bloggers, talking about similar subjects, and the one that was selected for this carnival was making loot a part of your game's plot. Something that
a pretty BA topic, I think. I browsed through some of the old topics and the upcoming topics. I think the loot one is probably my favorite, at least recently. It's pretty cool. In general, I like loot. I think every person who's ever played in an RPG likes loot at least a little bit. And I played Diablo 2 more than I care to admit, so I have a real problem with loot in general. I desperately crave it.
Yeah, Lee and I played Borderlands for, I would say, 400 to 500 hours total.
Yeah, it had to be.
And
a lot of time.
We went through that game a lot of different times just for loot. It was fantastic.
So everyone loves loot, and
Yes.
even if loot isn't part of the plot, when you let the players roll it on the spot, people still like to do that because it's interactive and fun and you get rewarded for it.
That's true. Also, I love the sheer randomness of what rolling random loot on the spot can do to a game. Jeff actually got pretty lucky because we rolled up in his most recent game what I would call incredibly destructive items to the plot of a game.
Well, yes, but I purposely made you re-roll the good stuff.
Yeah, but we still got a well of many worlds and a mirror of
opposition.
Now, in the hands of a regular group of characters, that is a game breaker. That is a hole that a game does not come back from. In that game, our characters are put them in the bag of holding, and we'll make a trap out of it later. And that's it.
I think it should be noted that we did not put the Well of Many Worlds in the bag of holding. We're not that dumb.
It should be noted that we're also drow, so the trap is going to be delicious when it comes.
So everyone likes loot, even if it's not part of the plot. So what are we talking about here?
I think that there's a lot of good ways to include loot in your plot. From the obvious, making some powerful artifact the focal point of the plot. I think that's an RPG standard, if you want to have, racing against, an evil villain for some artifact of ultimate power, that's, like I said, it's the gold standard, for which
we need to get the Dragonbane Greatsword before the Red Dragon comes back to terrorize the village.
Yeah.
We need to find the Lich's phylactery and all of the magic items he's hidden with it. We need to... Yeah.
Destroy the magic ring to destroy the evil warlord.
Get that miracle.
Feels like that one's been done before, right? I don't know.
Just a couple of times.
loot as the focal point of the plot. And it's not quite as much loot unless you get to do something with it, of course. But a lot of the times, if you're if it's loot that is meaningful, like a magic ring or a giant sword or something like that. If you're a cool GM, and I hope you are if you're listening to us, or just in general. Yeah, that's right. I only want cool GMs to listen to us.
You guys are all
then you
cool.
should let your players whip around that greatsword for a little bit. It's fun. You know, I mean, I think that if the loot is the focal point of your plot, then the players who've been chasing this thing for like 75 sessions are going to want to, you know, whip it around and see if it's magical.
Yeah, I guess, basically, on the subject of, what you had started with randomly generated treasure, I guess, in the most recent, 2 games that Jeff has run, the Drow games, he's more or less been going with a no magical market whatsoever, and all magical items are either, gained from specific plot points or found
or 2 of the players cheating.
Found as part of the treasure.
That is cheat.
Rory and Lee.
Generated randomly.
Oh, yeah.
What?
How am I a cheater?
Cheat.
They both played classes that automatically get a magical weapon. Anyway, moving on.
I mean, yes, that is true.
Yeah.
I
To
did
immediately
cheat
put
hard.
Ed and I at a disadvantage. It doesn't matter, because Joe's is going to make a magical weapon anyway.
But my
Don't
point,
worry, I will cut Joe's head off before it's an issue.
He's already got +3 to attack and damage.
My point is that I think
Did we forget about his phantom cheating? Is that what this? Continue.
Just removing like any sort of magical commerce and the acquiring of certain levels of like just magical enhancement at various points in progression, it kind of forces magic items at least to be part of the plot of the game, in that first of all you have each time you find a random magic item, you're gonna probably keep it. Somebody in the party is probably going to use it or keep it for a rainy day. So it's like it becomes kind of a part of your character's arsenal, which I think is really the way it was intended to be with like random treasure. Yeah. Whereas in games past, it's sort of been like we sell 90% of the equipment that isn't a sword or a stat boosting item or what have you. And then the other thing is if you want
magical plate mail.
If you want to acquire a magical item and you don't want to just trust it to the luck of the draw, you essentially have to identify an NPC who has a magical item and get it from them somehow.
Yep.
Like, I mean, toward the end of the first Drow game, we basically were, I mean, I'm sure we weren't intended to get them, but we were basically had a bunch of the most outrageously powerful magical items in the entire world dangled in front of our faces. And it's like, this would be really useful if I were to have it. But granted, at that time it wasn't super possible. But,
yeah.
Things like... and
it's hard to get magical items from a drow, ever.
Well, I guess one thing I wanted to bring up, and I don't know how related this is, but we were toying with the idea of talking about interplayer conflict. And if you want a magic item to be part of the plot, and interplayer conflict is a potential in the game, one thing Joe, when he was playing, he basically, like, these items Ed was talking about, he was the one character who actually got one of them. And he specifically didn't tell a single person out of game what the item did. So they were all, like, on, like, eggshells with him basically the whole game. Like it created this sort of tension that worked out to be pretty cool. And at the end of the game, he's like, this is all it does. And it was a good long list, but it's not like take over the world or anything.
Well, we knew it was pretty incredible because occasionally...
Yeah, when you add it to his girlfriend's weapon...
Amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, it was pretty entertaining because, first of all, I would say the entire situation, like we spent almost an entire session getting that sword, and then we gave it to the guy who basically did whatever he wanted at all times, and like we didn't even think twice about it. I mean, I didn't because I had no use for the goddamn thing. Like, we just gave it to him, and then it only occurred to us later that we had made an issue. And I think that's cool. It's like we spend a long time, like literally just getting something badass for our party, and then it created its own little sub-story that carried through to the end of the game. It was cool. It was interesting.
If there's potential for player conflict, then an item, if there's some sort of mystery or some sort of drawback or something, it can make plot. So I guess that's kind of like being part of the plot.
I love the idea of items with like powerful items, like that are that are interesting, that also have drawbacks. And I'm not just talking about, oh, it's a weapon that has a mind and it controls your body and makes you do all sorts of crazy shit. But like, I like the idea of items that have like serious drawbacks, like cursed items that are really powerful. That's really cool to me, especially when, if it becomes a concern for the whole party, like that is, that's like a whole subplot that the party basically makes for themselves by deciding to use the thing.
And I guess
I think that's pretty cool.
You bring up a pretty good point with your casual dismissal of intelligent items and the burden that they are. It really, okay. What I mean is, it really is it's kind of played out like the idea that, the item has a mind of its own, and if you try to go against it, you'll have to wrestle with wills, and maybe it'll just co-opt your body and do whatever it wants. And I really think that that's like the weakest way you can portray that sort of burden that the item puts on the character, just to take them over. I wonder if there's like, I can't recall really seeing it. I mean, I guess with Joe's weapon Finslayer in the Drow game we've been talking about, it was kind of done subtly in that it was sort of, Joe was clearly into it. It was sort of presented to him like his character might lose his will if he didn't just participate, which he then eagerly did, participate in whatever the weapon wanted. But I guess it's, if the player isn't into it, that just seems like kind of a weak, a weak way of expressing that drawback.
I think one way to turn that around, like, Joe was into it, so I was like, if I make Joe make a will save, he's gonna be down, he's into it, he wants to kill the party, whatever, he doesn't care. Whereas, like, if someone was not that receptive to that, one thing you could do to turn that around would be to tempt them with things. Like, instead of control what they do, offer them things for prices or something like that.
Like, what if the magic weapon, if it's an intelligent weapon or something like that, what if it, just subtly hints to them or lets them use a power one time and they have no idea why, and it's like, oh hey, if you murder this family of 12, maybe I'll let you use it a little more often.
Some classical conditioning for you.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I think that it can be like a weapon with a brain can be subtle. It doesn't have to be, bash you in the face, mind control all the time.
So we've been talking a lot about the D&D and Pathfinder aspect of this, but we've had White Wolf weapons that do the same. Ed, didn't you have a thing that was like a scepter or something that you got that guy from?
Yeah, we in a mage game, another game of Jeff's, oh
god, this whole situation got out of hand.
It really did. Basically, as a spirit mage, I had started consorting with a powerful spirit, which, he was just, I guess I don't know how to express White Wolf traits, but he was rank 3, which means he was basically more powerful than I was, except I could kind of persuade him to do things. And eventually, like, the exchanges we had been making led to him getting a source of power that I was unaware he was using. And I happened upon him one day in an extremely satiated with energy and dangerous state, and so I decided to go for broke and just force him into an item to make a fetish, and I managed to do it. And so I basically had this intensely powerful spirit bound up in an item that could do this, like, basically a giant blast attack, which I don't even remember if I think I used at the very end of the game a bunch of times, but like I never used it on Earth, is basically what it amounts to.
The thing,
yes, used it on the moon. That got out of control too.
Yeah, what I liked about how that played out is that he didn't use it. Like, it was cool. Like, it was extremely powerful, and I felt okay giving him a super powerful item because I told him how many successes he needed, and he knew the consequences was death. So the stakes were high. It's cool. It worked out. But he didn't like run around the fucking city like blowing people up. Like,
yeah, it really became kind of a nuclear option. Like, I didn't want to use it because once I used it, anybody and everybody was going to use everything that they had to get me. And I was still a squishy man made out of hamburger meat.
that's really how Mage works anyway. It's kind of.
I actually really liked the way that played out with regards to the NPCs because they, most of the NPCs didn't really know, but like the NPCs who participated in making that kill button happen were like, "Hey, listen, we know what you did." And it's interesting.
Yeah, basically we had one NPC who was also a spirit mage, and as soon as I did it, she all of a sudden thought that I had somehow turned evil because I was carrying around this death stick, which she eventually came to terms with
Fair assumption.
in an expression of her own greed that she wanted to get this thing off of me after I inevitably died using it.
Speaking of which, it's a good thing I never got my hands on that stick. That would have turned ugly fast.
I liked how that whole thing played out because Ed ended up creating a powerful weapon that was just the idea of having it made plot, but not necessarily using it made plot.
Right.
And
you just did it all on your own, really. I mean, with some coercion from Jeff, but
see, I think that's one thing that can be really cool about magic items. And I mean, this doesn't work quite as well for a game like D&D where you're in combat all the time and you're encouraged to use your magic items all the time, blowing shit up all over the place, unless you have something like anyway. The point is that like, White Wolf specifically, I haven't played too many other systems, but like it doesn't have, a lot of blasé stat sticks, it doesn't have a +5 sword. I mean, it kinda does, but you know what I mean. And, like, so the inherent magicness of the items in that is interesting and has it has narrative behind it, like driving the item. So just the existence of it, not even necessarily using it, is interesting. And I think that can be the same in D&D, but there has to be if you want items to be interesting in that sort of context, the GM has to go out of their way to make that happen.
Yeah.
They have to tell a story about every item, and items can't be raining from the sky.
Well, we don't really do, honestly, in the D&D and Pathfinder stuff, we don't do a lot with you have to go to this specific place and get the Helm of Valhalla or something like that. Like, we get really cool items, or it's randomized stuff, but never a lot of times where we're looking for specific artifacts or world-changing things. Not that I can really remember, not that have had that big of an impression on me.
I said, I think in Jeff's Drow game, again going back to it because it's the game we played that has the least magical items. He really drove. I mean, the player's desire to create. Like I was a character who spent a lot of time making our team more powerful by creating magical items, and Jeff's idea for it was that it would, you'd have to put in effort in order to create a magical item. You had to find rare things or come up with a cool idea, and pretty much every magical item was unique and interesting like that. And I mean, we. Like, the magic item, I didn't make a big pile of magic items and then say, oh, everyone pick from the pile, enjoy yourselves. But, when I wanted to make someone an item, I, spent time coming up with something cool, usually something related to a plot point we had recently or something like that. And, we went through some time, did some role-playing related to it, and I think it added a lot of character to the items.
One thing I think,
yeah, that's really cool. Doing the whole type of where we create from plot that we've had, we create the magical items, and I had these really awesome these bracelets for my character that Lee had come up with an idea for, and they were it was really cool, but that was loot from a plot point that was created, or that I had previously, and then we had just kind of added that into it. so that I could have like this really cool magical item. But like what I was going for was, we never really seek out loot from like the beginning of a game. Like,
I don't think we spend a lot of time making loot the central focus of a quest.
Yeah, exactly. Which is I always found interesting. I mean, we've done it a few times, but
I think we did it a couple times in Sean games.
I guess.
Yeah, but
Jeff had a game where we were doing that in one of his
One of the Chronicles
of
games.
Chronicles, where we started at low level looking for an artifact.
Yeah,
I don't know the name of it.
Zortor?
Gosh, the Zortor thing.
Zortor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that game was pretty fun.
Those are some short games, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but that was my point, because we come across it where we create our own plot points with that stuff, but we've never been a group that would really do the whole this thing is a really important part, because it just seems, I don't know why we haven't really done that.
I guess
to me it seems, well,
I always hear negative feedback about that. Like,
yeah,
when I listen to like other
to me it seems
podcasts or
like just
like
a
read blogs on the
quest.
internet, people like hate that. They're like, "Oh, it's go find this thing," and I'm like, "Well, that might be okay."
I think if the thing is cool, like, and I think that there can be a lot of interesting conflict over like powerful magic items, especially if like I said before, if like the players have the opportunity to use it if they're successful, like in addition to the quest being potentially interesting, you know what I mean, like you can run into just a lot of crazy awesome stuff just by chasing down something at the same time as somebody else is chasing it down. But
potential to use it is what makes it a role-playing game and not a video game.
Yeah, exactly. The like getting your hands on the powerful artifact and like using it to blast the first enemy you see off the face of the earth, like that's the exclamation point at the end of the sentence, like that's a good time. I love that.
Yeah,
I want to play more of those games because I want that to happen.
If conflict can be built up through a series of throughout sessions for this item, like it becomes a bigger and bigger importance for the people to have for one reason or another, I think that'd be a really interesting way to go with a campaign. But like, if it's like your whole goal is to get this item, and then it's this really awesome item that makes or breaks the world in one thing, and then you end the game at that. That, to me, it's just like, well, I'm going for this item that is going to end the game. But if it does something that's, that doesn't break the game, but it significantly changes it somehow to continue the game in a few different types of paths, that sounds pretty interesting to me, anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We haven't really done too much with the whole
loot,
the
loot,
super loot,
meaningful loot,
artifact type thing.
I guess I don't want to, bring up the obvious, but in the most recent game that Jeff has run, the new Drow game, that was our most recent quest, was to retrieve an artifact. And while,
true, but I mean, I think it's interesting in that none of our characters treat it like it's important.
We as a group don't seem to intend to use it for anything, because no one in the party, I don't know if anybody in the group thinks we can.
He's shaking his head back and forth like he is going to do dastardly things with it.
Well, all I'm saying is, you're contradicting yourself then, because I'm not saying that my character thinks it's important, because it is a means to a whole lot of rewards, which I believe that we will get when we bring it back to the people who sent us to get it. However, if one of us should maybe try to use it, we will either reap great rewards or be eternally screwed by the choice to do so.
I would love. I think it would be awesome if one of the Meiji types tried to use it and just got incinerated.
To me,
it would be hilarious.
Probably be good kindling.
Yeah, I mean, seriously,
start fire.
So Rory, if you're thinking about using some of those magical pages you got,
you're getting cold.
I encourage you. I would like to be warm for the night.
Well, the last time I used Magic Device in that game, I did summon an avatar of Mistra.
Well, it was on purpose, wasn't it?
Mostly.
If it's done on purpose,
that was going to happen anyway, the way I see it. Wow. Still, that was a good time. And you almost killed my kobold, you bastard.
He'll die eventually, don't worry.
Yeah, but that item is kind of a...
I think it's a subplot.
Yeah, to me, that didn't seem like the defining point of why we were going there. It was an excuse, more
that whole
more or less
series of events that
for us to get out
has been going on lately seems like a whole big collection of subplots for us.
Yeah. Anyway, as we were looking for this thing in sort of an excuse to get out of the Underdark, at least for me. And so we're now drow on the surface that are looking for this thing, but that's not. It's a focal point, like it's the destination, but it's not the. It's part of the journey, but it's not it's not the hell or high water. We need to get this. We need to get this because there's awesome stuff at the end, but not that. I don't know.
I think I'm going to classify that game as a diversion of a prequel that needs to end before you change the surface more than you already have.
Well, Jeff, you gave us an artifact. Let's see where it goes from there.
I think
but
seriously, I'm going to sink that boat.
Well, the point is Jeff almost gave us an
I
artifact.
think that Jeff has just now given us an objective.
That is true.
I agree.
Artifact.
But yeah, I mean, I think
Let's see what damage we can do.
I agree with what Evo was talking about, where I guess from the two examples you mentioned, my style seems to be introduce an item that has potential and hopefully some plot will come of it. Mm-hmm. Whereas the other style, which we don't generally use, and maybe Rory, maybe you have different experience with your groups, is the game is started and there's an item that is ingrained in the plot and used effectively as such.
I've actually been in a number of groups that did more with get item A or something like that. I mean, actually, you have as well. If you remember the first Lanta FinSafe game, the point was collecting those statues.
That is true.
And that's a lot more of a video game style of play, but it's simpler to get people involved in the plot by doing that. I've run games before where powerful magical items have been central to the plot, relating back to if you're familiar with the Weapons of Legacy book.
Yeah.
For D&D.
Boy, briefly.
I used some things similar from that, made some epic artifact items, and then made them required in order to fight against a certain group or enemy. So that they were, part of the goal was to acquire these items and figure out how they work at the same time that they're actually doing other things as well.
Didn't those things level up with characters?
Right. So one of the ways I integrated them, not so necessarily with the plot, but with the game itself, is I created a 10-level prestige class for each one of the items.
Okay.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that when they found one, they could become attuned to it and then actually level up in the prestige class for that item as well. And it more changed the rules dynamic of the game than the plot dynamic in that way. But it still was very integral to the plot to get people involved for stopping the end of the world.
Yeah, see, I think in general, you've probably played in a wider variety of games than we have in general. But I don't know, it seems like Jeff said, people sort of malign the chase down weapons, chase down artifacts thing. But I mean, I think there are definitely interesting ways to do it. And I don't know, maybe it's just something that we haven't explored and we probably should.
It's classic mode. I mean, we've done it. It's just been a while. It's just
a long while. It's been long enough that I couldn't remember it until someone reminded me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wanted to go back to Lanta for a little bit, which was, one of the longest running, I would call it a series of games.
Extremely fun.
That I've ever been in. It was awesome. And I mean, the first one, we went hunting for these artifact statues forever. I swear.
Yeah, we trekked all over the planet, and it took fucking...
I came in the middle of that one, and we were still looking around for them things.
You came in the middle of the game, and we were still looking for the first one. We ran down that first statue forever, and it was great. the whole time, I don't see how I would ever be that patient ever again. Like, well, I don't.
As a player?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would get like 3 or 4 sessions into it, and I'd be like, why haven't we made any progress? Why haven't we found anything? I think
games in 2-hour segments.
I'm pretty sure what it was in that game was that Sean had devised such a detailed world that he basically had a point A and a point B, and there was 1,000 little points in between that he wanted us to take us on tours of.
Really, a dump truck plowing through those points like they're pedestrians in GTA.
You're constantly learning and you're fighting, and that's.
Yeah.
But
we met a lot of NPCs, and it was really cool in general.
Another thing that I wanted to bring up, Lanta related, was in the 3rd installment of Lanta. There was, I know because I kind of co-GM'd it.
Sword?
Oh no, the ultimate weapons.
We devised one special weapon for each character and doled them out over a span of several sessions, and
that was a good time.
That was just one of those things. Like, I don't know if it was really like ingraining the weapons in the plot, because some of them were, some of them weren't so much, but it was like it was clearly intended for each individual character, and we really kind of, I don't know, dolled them up to be really impressive. And, you know, I frankly don't remember what most of them were, even though I designed the lion's share of them. But it was just kind of...
All I remember about him is that in every one of the flashbacks regarding my character, he was wielding a lightning bolt sword.
Yeah.
And then the primary antagonist for the game was using that sword in every single time we met him, and to the point that, among other things, my character became fixated on that weapon. And this is one of the things that sort of drove me to make the blog post that I made, where, it's like, I think it's awesome when somebody has, like, especially like a bad guy has like an iconic weapon.
Right.
And,
you
like,
get it.
when you take that guy down, like, it's awesome when you get that weapon, it might not even be the best weapon in your arsenal, it's just there's a story behind it that makes it awesome, that, like you get attached to it before you even have it. I like that.
Yeah,
I think it's really cool.
That is cool. I mean, that's a little bit of foreshadowing, and
yeah, it's like it's plot that you don't even necessarily have to work towards. Like, you don't have to work on it that hard as a GM, because you can just give, like, some NPC antagonist who the characters meet 3 or 4 times, or maybe he's just some guy terrorizing a town, but every time you see him, he's got this big, dangerous longbow with, like, dragon scales on it and spikes and shit all over the place. And, like, they see him a few times, and that, they associate that weapon with being a badass. And then, when they take that guy down, like, it's already something that's an important part of the plot. Like, your archer guy is going to feel so awesome when he gets that, and every time he uses it, he's going to remember it. And... I think that's cool.
Every time he uses it, he's going to remember the hit points he previously lost to it.
Exactly.
And it's going to make it that much better.
Like that's something that I think, like, as a GM, like I said, I don't think you have to work on it that hard. You describe it once or twice, you make the guy seem pretty BA, and then you just sort of let it work on the player's minds on its own. I don't know. I think, like, it can be really ingrained subtly into the plot like that.
Yeah, definitely. I want to give anybody who wants to, an opportunity to say anything else they have about making loot part of the plot, because I have an awesome segue, and I'm getting ready to knock this into our next topic. Anybody?
If you can seg, you can go all the way.
We're just talking about our mutual gaming friend Sean's long-running series of campaigns.
Yeah.
now just remembered as Lanta. Basically, we were going to talk about role-playing in big groups. And
the biggest groups.
Big groups.
Very big groups.
Lanta was a long-running game with, a number of parties taking up the mantle of the adventurers. And the one thing was, everybody...
All of the attic.
Everybody was always invited. No one was left out of Lanta.
Nope.
There were some sessions that were not super big, but as a
Those
rule,
were the minority.
it was like, I don't know, 7 players at least,
I
sometimes
would
as
say
many as 10
6
or
to
11.
12.
Yeah.
I think 12 was biggest. Like, we fit 12 people in that tiny attic. And I firmly believe that the entire reason for this is that Sean did not want to be impolite to anybody, and Sean desperately craved an audience for his ridiculous set pieces.
And it got cold in that attic.
It did, and when you had 12 people in there, it was pretty comfy.
It got hot in that attic.
It got hot in that
Not in the
attic.
Yeah,
summer.
well, I am not a fat person, Ed.
Oh,
So
well,
it was comfy for me.
get over
He
your...
means fat with a PH, man.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
whatever.
That is what I meant. You are correct, sir.
So,
that-
okay, big groups meaning large groups of people, not big people, in this context.
Big people in big groups.
It's got really cool in here.
Our
But yeah,
role-playing group was supersized.
Of a punk album that was called Fat Music for Fat People, and it was funny. Short music for short people was like 30-second punk songs, and there's like 100 of them on the CD.
well, isn't that nice?
So it was a punk CD.
It was actually really funny, but
Anyway,
So-
yeah, I mean, Sean ran big groups almost exclusively for the first, 4 launch offensive games? I don't know how many he actually, I think it was, and, like, he spent a long time cultivating our group to be, willing sheep who are willing to, stand idly while his NPCs gave speeches and while all sorts of crazy stuff happened. And
I'll
you know,
admit that the first 1 or 2 of his games in that long legacy were kind of railroady. There was a lot of, NPCs doing their thing. There was a lot of, you have to go to this place, and we all just agree.
Well, honestly, I don't. I mean, you say kind of railroady. I mean, they were a lot of it spectator games, and I don't mean to say that in a bad way. They were like the best games. They were really awesome. But that's part of the reason I think why the big groups worked is because we were still pretty new to role playing, at least most of us, and we didn't really want to talk all that much unless Sean prompted us to. And we just kind of went along the path and did the quest and fought the enemies and watched the cutscenes. Like, he would do up these cinematic cutscenes. We did a podcast about it a while back. Anyway, they were really awesome. And that was what was so fun about going to Lanta, is because I was always happy to see what happens next and how the story unfolds.
Yep.
And I didn't care that I wasn't choosing which way it folds. That sort of developed later. I mean, at that point, it was just fun to see the story, and that's the style of the game, and you can really have however many players for that type of game.
Yeah, you can really be role-playing with 30 people if you're going to be, telling, like, big, awesome Final Fantasy-style stories.
And we didn't have a battle board, so, like, turns went actually really fast, because you just rolled an attack, and here's your damage. It was 2nd edition, it was pretty
Oh my god.
easy, I guess. Like, the numbers weren't very big, you weren't making a billion attacks.
Well, some of us
making a
were.
billion attacks.
Well, some of us were making 3 attacks every 2 turns, and that was awkward as usual, but
Well, some of us were making fucking 10 attacks every 2 turns. I cheated though, so it's fine.
yeah,
Weren't you
That
cheated?
skills and powers book was broken. Just saying.
but
The
yeah, I mean,
solipsism was broken.
Yes, it was desperately broken.
I
That was
guess,
a good game.
But I mean, that was a fairly unique example. The way he ran that,
Yes.
that he could do the cinematic scenes was very unique. I know that as a GM, I can't pull off scenes like that. But
No, and-
despite that, I've ran some really large games. I think the largest I ever ran was 24 players.
what?
But
Like the party.
these were all for one shots. I haven't ever ran a long-going campaign arc with that many players. I think some of you were there for that. That was
I remember
actually,
that.
the day after my wedding.
Okay,
We
yeah.
I
got
remember that.
together.
I guess I didn't realize it was so many people.
There were 24 players there that day.
Yeah, I was there.
And I mean, yeah, you to be able to get people to be involved at all, there has to be some railroading. If everybody wants to do their own thing, you just can't run a game with that many players.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think if you're running a game with more than 6 players, it's gonna be a more cinematic game. Like,
So-
it has to be.
So, I mean, I ran with 10 to 14 players fairly regularly at conventions for one-shots, for like day-long events, and other things like that. And they've gone pretty well, but it's always been more of a module feel in many ways.
Sure. A little more video gamey.
You've got goals, but the goals are related to everyone. One of the things I did try to do is I tried to get characters beforehand and make sure everybody had a background and sub-goals related to the plot. So that while everybody was still doing the same thing, they had different interests involved in that as well.
Yeah.
And that worked a lot better, but it's still just managing the game turn with that many players gets really difficult.
That's got to be some slow combat rounds.
I mean,
I think that part of the thing that really works against that is that the vast majority of the time, if you're going to challenge a large group of players, like even remotely challenge them, you're either going to need a big, powerful monster that takes a dozen attacks a turn, or a dozen medium monsters who take a couple attacks a turn. And that's like in addition to managing all of these players, you have to manage whatever's fighting against them. And that's, I mean, like, I run small games on purpose, I don't like to run with more than 4 people. And, like, it's hard enough for me with 4 people and 2 monsters to just keep track of what's happening. Like, I can't even imagine running for over double that many people and over double that many monsters. It's just ridiculous.
I mean, for that game that I was just talking about, there are 24 players, and the first fight was against 7 Baylors.
I do remember that.
Yes.
And none of them were standing close enough together to blow each other up.
At the very end, 3 of them blew each other up, but that was in the Wall of Force. So it was only the people who were within the Wall of Force, and all of them had evasion. So it was just a chain reaction of Baylors that did nothing.
I guess a couple of things I wanted to say that I would think qualify as sort of advice for this is, first of all, as a player who's played in a number of these games, it doesn't feel great when the GM singles out a player that isn't you and does a lot of stuff with them. But I would say that running that sort of game, it's useful to know which characters, I guess, are more tuned into the overall plot that you're trying to run, and give them some of the attention and some of the, decision making authority, not necessarily authority over the other players, but just like engage them in what they want to accomplish that's related to what you want them to accomplish. And then the other thing that I would say, and this I've observed both in running games, which are granted not, Lanta-sized, and also with the most recent of Sean's Lanta games, which was with a little bit more, modern players with, ideas about what railroading should be and whether they should avoid it. I find that what kind of works is if you kind of compartmentalize the player characters in your mind and know like which characters are likely to agree about things, and you can give small groups attention instead of giving single players attention.
Mm-hmm.
That way you can divide the spotlight maybe 2 or 3 ways instead of 7 or 8 ways. Because if you have I guess I'm mainly thinking of that most recent Lanta game. I just sort of felt like we had probably, 7 or 8 players. I don't think it was the biggest one ever, but sometimes it was pretty big. But I never felt like we were that divided, because it wasn't ever a super long time before, I got to do a little bit of something.
Yeah.
We were all kind of in 2s and 3s. And I've noticed that too, running games is just, mostly my games never got that big, but, mostly it's like if you have 5 players and they don't all want to do the same thing, maybe a group of 2 and a group of 3 are going to be together, and you can kind of keep track of what's going on based on, smaller number of divisions.
Yeah, and I found there are good ways to gently shove agreeing characters together who wouldn't, like the one guy is just going to be like, oh, well, I'm at the bar getting drunk, and that he would go along with something that another player is doing. So I mean, it's maybe be like, oh, well, you happen upon this bar and your friend is there getting drunk, and
right.
I mean, you can gently shove characters together to try to get them to interact more and to get them to follow similar plot points.
Yeah. One of the things that I found the biggest issue, though, is when the world is more open, and you're not necessarily doing, you don't have a place to go immediately. It's tough because a lot of people want to do completely different things. And then it's like, I want to be really secret about what I'm doing, though. And to me, that is probably the most difficult thing because both my fault, just because of me, people waited for, me and maybe two other people. People wait for an hour to get something done. Or, it's like, I'm like, well, other people have been doing stuff, so I guess I should be doing stuff on my own too. And then it's just a snowballing of a bunch of people doing stuff on their own while other people wait in the vicinity in a bar, not actually doing anything.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Ed was hitting on, because I could see, if we want to call that like a sandbox type of game, I can see that working with 3 players who are really into deciding where the game is going and 5 followers.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got 7 or 8 guys, even 6, if you've got a bunch of people really trying to do a bunch of different things in a sandbox game, it just gets boring, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, because you're always spending so much time waiting. I think if you're in a large, group game, that you have to, there has to be a point where, you have to be honest with yourself and you have to be like, okay, I'm in a big ass game. There's a ton of people in this game. You gotta give it up once in a while. You can't, you've got to, if you're a leader person, you've got to try to get other people involved in, try to get the follower-y types involved in what you're doing. Even the leader-y types, just try to get people who are sitting on the sidelines, sitting in their bars, try to get them involved, or just try to, unobtrusively or even obtrusively pass the spotlight in their direction. Maybe bring a problem into their vicinity, or create, one of these bizarro, crazy schemes that you have, create it in the bar that the board players are doing something at. I think, players can go a long way to helping a large group game work. It's just a matter of, identifying when you should be doing that.
Yeah, and awareness and buy-in from the players are both key, and the GM can help with that.
They definitely can.
A player might try to do more sandbox-style role-playing things in a more cinematic or just dungeon crawly type of game. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of that, as are others. And, it's just if there's a ton of players, that just might not be appropriate. It might be better just to, know that the game is what it is and have fun with what you're setting out to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, though.
The GM can also always split the group. That's something that's not talked about very often. But if you have 10 consistent players, you can always make 2 groups of 5 players in the same setting. That's something that I actually have split groups a couple of times, at least temporarily, and seen where it has gone, and it worked pretty well actually. Sometimes I've co-opted one of the players to become a sub GM, and co-GM with them. With different groups going simultaneously. I did that a few times. Or I also just put the groups and had them meet different nights and had them interact with each other. in the game world, but not directly in the same party anymore.
Oh, you're just trying to do twice as much role playing. I see this ploy here.
Double the role playing.
It's taking the idea of splitting the players into groups for spotlight time one step further and actually just splitting the group itself.
Yeah.
I guess going back to what Lee was talking about, my problem with one of the problems with the 7 to 8 person group is if you don't have 2 people buying into the thing or who aren't realizing what's going or what they need to do, or if they don't want to or they don't care, it's going to be tough if they just want to be I want to be on my own doing this thing because other people are doing other things, or I want to be on my own just because I want to be on my own doing this. If you have 2 people that doing it, it's a lot tougher for the other people to have the mindset of, well, we still have to stick together.
I think that you need, aside from troublemakers, that is to say, in a large group, people who do stuff. I think you need leaders. It's important to have to identify your leadery players, and and if it seems like you need stuff to happen, those are the guys you make stuff happen to, because you can count on those guys to get other people involved. You can count on those guys to immediately buy into the things that you're trying to get to happen. It's important to identify those people, early on. Also, and this is something that I realized that we started doing more recently. I think just maybe as we got to be more mature role players, but if you're planning on running a large group game, and I mean I guess this goes for any game really, but if you're planning on running a large group game and you're planning on running the cinematic, Final Fantasy cutscenes epic, I think you should just tell your players beforehand, that hey, I'm inviting everyone.
Yeah.
This is the kind of game I'm gonna run. You don't it's probably gonna be a railroady game, but I have this awesome story I want to tell. And I want people to play in it also, and I think that's, Sean didn't always make that clear, and then you would get people like our old friend Arliss, who would bring an almost immense amount of conflict into the game, because he had, even if he, I honestly think that he didn't really understand the point of the game. And he would come into it with his own mindset, and if he had known what the point of the game was, he might not have even joined the game. It wouldn't have ever been a problem, but, it wasn't made clear and that sort of thing, and, lately we've been a lot clearer with, telling people, this is the style of game I want to run, I want to run a dungeon crawler, I want to run a high concept game, I want to run a sandbox game, and, if you're a person who's just starting out, or even if you're a person who just doesn't do this, I strongly advise that you do, make sure that everybody knows. It gives people a clearer idea of what they want to do, of what they should be doing during a session. And I think that can help alleviate a lot of the problems of a large group. If people just know what kind of game they're playing from the get-go.
Yeah, and a large group is just a very bad forum for exploring your role-playing sexuality, so to speak. It's because you start out and the most important thing to you is that you're a fighter and you got to roll this die and you get +7 and then you're good to go. And then you start getting into actually playing your character and role-playing, and then you're like, oh crap, I can have influence on the game, and then that sort of all starts playing out, and that all is so much more suited to be developed in smaller groups.
Mm-hmm.
There are a bunch of social nuances that occur when role playing that it takes a lot to pick up on. No, I was lying.
Tell me more about these social nuances. I've never.
Well,
never even heard that word.
I thought we were just talking.
Me roll dice, me hit with sword.
No, I'm just saying that. No, there's a bunch of things that we haven't picked up on.
I'm not gonna pay attention.
That even it takes a while to understand something that's going to happen when you don't know you don't know. Yeah, it's like the first time I was in a group of 8 people. It was with Sean, and he was. It worked just fine because we were talking to each other about what Sean was doing when he was, doing it like is spectator mode. And it was like watching some sports game or something, and it was awesome. But then when it's like sandbox time, that's a completely different scenario or a different type of game altogether. And people who have even been role playing a lot, that's going to still throw them for a loop for what you should and shouldn't do, maybe. But it's just saying, throwing new players into that type of a lot of people game where you're able to do what you want, it's difficult to pull off, I would say.
Well, I'd say there's an overlap there. I'd say that the types of games that are good for big groups are probably similar to the types of games that are good for new players. Like, you can throw a new player into a dungeon crawl or a cinematic game. You can run a dungeon crawl or a cinematic game with tons of people. But you throw a new player into a sandbox game, and in my experience, they just get bored. And
I think it's
exactly.
I think it's worth noting that like there are probably some game styles that just don't work. That don't work well for large groups anyway. Like a sandbox games, I think you're gonna have a hard time selling that convincingly to a large group of people. Definitely know the type of game you want to run. Like Sean's most successful large group games were the cinematic ones. Like later on when he started getting a little more sandboxy, letting people wander around a lot and do whatever they want and that sort of thing. Like, I think those were less successful. When he was getting the group together, storming the castle as a group, like coming across the villain in the castle with all the sticks coming out of his shoulders and doing all this crazy magic and stuff. Like, those were really successful games. But like later on, Sean sort of was branching out in these other directions, and I just don't think it was suited for the large groups. And
I don't think he liked it. I think he did it because he thought we wanted it.
Yeah, and what we wanted was,
what he was doing before.
What he was doing before, and where it didn't matter how big the group was.
Here's the thing with that. That was also at that point kind of something newer to us too. Yeah. What he was doing, and we're being thrown into a new situation that we don't understand. Like I was talking about the social nuances. Which I'm just gonna just put that all
Damn
over
these
everything.
Social nuances.
Well, you guys made fun of me for it, so now
like
I have
the mayonnaise to your like sandwich. Put it
anyway,
on
no. The thing is, we didn't know what to do in those situations, and it went on for a few games where we were all doing our own type of thing, and it was not a perfect situation because we did not understand what we needed to do to keep the game fun and enjoyable. And I think one of the problems with, I think that's one of the problems with those earlier type of games anyway. But if we did it now differently, knowing what the problems were before, I think it could work.
It'd just be a lot. I think it's a lot more. It's a lot more effort and work to get a large group game to work.
Yeah.
In that type of in that type of game, like in a sandbox game, or in a personal character driven interaction drama. I think it's going to be hard to get a large group to work in those sorts of games.
Yeah.
Just in general, and the fact that he was that we were trying new things in the first place was difficult, especially since, in addition to the experienced role players trying new things, there were also people who had almost never role played there. It was a combination of factors that made the game much harder on Sean than it should have been, which was his own fault. I'll freely admit that. It was just a poor choice, poor timing. for that sort of thing. But the large group thing made the new things that he was trying to do much more difficult.
I guess one more thing that I really wanted to talk about with relation to big groups, and I guess I mainly want to ask about this because looking inward, I just feel like I'm woefully unqualified to give advice about this subject, which is basically both from the point of view of a player and a GM. What do you think about, and how would you deal with chatter? And by that I mean both players independently talking about things that are not game related. You know, basically the large group will make it such that some players are not being focused on. They're not in a scene, so they might not think it's important, and they will have a sidebar. Or also such things as basically anything else that would distract a player, like reading books that aren't relevant to what their character's doing, playing portable video games or phone games, or drawing pictures. What advice would you give for both girding yourself against that as a player and also preventing or dealing with it as a GM?
I think in a small group, I mean, to get it out of the way, I think in a small group you're not typically going to have that problem, but in a large group it's going to be, much more common.
And
I don't know. I think
in case I missed this point, making this point, I don't feel qualified to give advice about this because I constantly do it and I don't know how to stop.
Yeah,
I try to, as a player, I usually spend the majority of my time, I'll freely admit that, I'm a person who tends to focus on the plot and to focus on moving things forward. I guess I'm kind of a pusher, so I don't get as much opportunity to chatter as some people do, for one reason or another. And I guess when it happens, I usually don't spend as much time doing it in the first place. I tend to, I don't know, I guess it bothers me when as a leadery type player, as a player who tries to get things done, it bothers me when I try to involve other people and they're clearly not buying in. They're clearly not interested. It makes me feel like I'm the one of the few interested players in the game. And as a player, that makes me, that it cheapens the whole gaming experience. It makes it more of a board game and less of a role-playing game. That's just getting some of the problems out of the way. As for dealing with it, I think being direct is probably the best way to deal with it. I think as a player, you should either talk to your GM and have them deal with it, or talk to the other players and try to, get something accomplished. I don't know. It sucks when, when people are constantly doing other things and you as a player are trying to move something forward.
In a big group, go ahead.
In that scenario, I've been, it's like me and, before anyway, I don't know about now, but Joe and I used to not be, completely ingrained in the plot, and, we wouldn't do as much stuff as other people. And when that takes an hour for somebody to do something like that, we're gonna get Joe would start playing PSP, or I would start doing rolling dice games, or just rolling my dice constantly and playing little games with him. That's something that I do often. But it's tough because when I know, like, you want to get the plot to be going, but if we're not involved in the plot itself at this point, it's really tough for us to want to be forced to be involved when we're, I don't know. It's generally when I'm doing stuff like that, we haven't been really involved in the thing, and stuff that's going on is not stuff that is pertinent to what needs to be done to continue the plot. That's usually when I stop paying attention, I guess, or used to anyway, when I felt that what was going on did not involve me whatsoever.
Well, I think that hits on a good point that a certain amount of chatter can actually be reasonable. But go ahead, Roy.
Responding from Evil, what I've done as a GM to try to alleviate that when I've noticed players who tend to talk more, but still are interested in the game when they can be involved, I have given their characters more investment in the plot, or tried to encourage their characters becoming more invested in the plot, so they have more reason to be involved with things directly, and less reason to sit on the sidelines and chat.
And I think
it's worked. Sometimes it's worked. It hasn't worked sometimes. If the player himself is not invested in the game, they're always going to talk.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's I think it's easy as a GM to overlook that. Like this is something that I don't know if Sean overlooked ever, but it was a problem for a lot of his earlier games and even some of his later games where it was there was always something was always happening to him. Like, he's just one guy, so if people are constantly vying for his attention, even if it's the same 4 people, it always seems like something is happening to him, so he might not even notice the chatter. As long as his epic scenes are going off without a hitch, he's not too concerned. But I think it's important to bring it up to the GM, be like, hey, it sucks when people aren't paying attention. Is there anything you can do to help?
Well, in a big game, there's got to be a reason for people to want to pay attention.
Yeah.
Like, you can't expect a player to pay attention to 5 other players' backstory plots and maybe get a chance to do something at some point. Like, that's just inhuman. Like, that's crazy.
Yep.
So,
I get bored at such a lower threshold than that.
But I think it's important that maybe it's just what if you just try to force the main plot, the plot that everyone's invested in, maybe you just try to force it, make it happen. If people are getting bored and they're not instantly, maybe you're not in their hometown, but you're in 3 other people's hometown, and you have 4 people just being bored sitting on the sidelines. I don't think it would be a bad idea to just make plot happen, major plot.
One thing I found speaking of that exact thing, in more modern settings, cell phones are god. Because, if the game starts to drag, you can have someone get a call, and then shit's on.
Yeah.
Everyone has to do something now.
Your cell phone rings. Oh my god. The one guy got called. Everyone's waiting for that call to end. Then that guy starts calling people. Like a chain reaction. Yeah, I know what you mean.
I guess I feel like
that magical cell phones are so much harder to come by.
In your modern setting games, the most recent ones, I feel like you will. I guess this is the several White Wolf derivative games you ran before your Mage game, which were in sort of a sci-fi setting, kind of.
The Mage game.
Which included cell phones and TV and stuff. I felt like you would give us cell phone calls or breaking news broadcasts when we didn't, need our attention snapped into place. You would give us extra,
Yeah, I mean,
honestly,
that's not what I'm talking about. I was literally just trying to add layers of complexity at that point. I wasn't trying to grab your attention. I was just screwing with
trying
you.
to just throw your attention in a different direction.
But I guess I'm just saying, you would there's not necessarily. I'm not going to say there's not too much, but if you think you have everybody's attention, you might even press the issue a little bit by adding a little bit more complexity at that point. That way, maybe there's some people who aren't all the way invested in this current development. Maybe a new development comes along. Now it's important that everybody be tuned into at least one of these things, or else something's going to slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a line where, and it's just a judgment call, where the GM and the other players have to provide enough content to interest everyone, or some people are going to get bored and not pay attention and be somewhat disruptive, and that's kind of okay. And then there's a point at which someone being disruptive is unwarranted and it's just disrespectful.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess you're right.
Two scenarios
And I think everybody, like as a player and as a GM, especially in a larger group, you have to try to be mindful of that. I've talked about the leader players before, but like it might seem like a weird thing to say, but it's kind of your job to, know what your player dynamic is.
Yeah.
And, to try to aid the GM in involving people, especially in large groups, where it's difficult for the GM to get things on track all the time, to try to give everyone the attention they deserve. It'll always be important to have, in a large group, to have those players who can help the GM, and it'll always be important as the GM to try to keep, to section off a part of your brain to keep track of which players are getting bored, and try to head them off at the pass before they get out of hand.
Yeah, when a person has to be asked twice for their response to something, or when they have to be told twice, or they've been waiting and then you're waiting for them to do something, I think that's really the threshold. Just to go off on a different tangent, like if you try to bring somebody into something and it's been like 5 or a few minutes, and they don't respond because they weren't paying attention, that frustrates me.
I guess.
Yeah. Or if someone has to be re-explained what's going on once they're brought into something, I mean, that's kind of something that, if it happens once in a while, it's not that big of a deal. But if it's consistent, then, you gotta, I don't know, play with people who are willing to respect everyone's time, I guess. But, I don't know.
I guess one thing that this discussion is making me think of is I can't even remember which game this was. I'm pretty sure this was I know this was a Jeff game. You had a kind of like an XP reward for basically keeping the pace up in combat, which we all kind of expected to get because we all kind of tried to do it. I think it was in your 4th edition game.
You guys bit super hard on that, so it was just, I didn't really have to do a lot. You guys pretty much did all the work on that one.
But I guess what I'm thinking is, like, my first response was I've read a number of role playing games which have, like, I've read at least one that has suggested, like, this is mainly a combat thing, but it's like if the player hesitates, like if they're not ready to take their actions in combat, you should punish them by making their character hesitate. And I think that all things considered, negatively reinforcing what you want your players to do is never really going to make you any great friends. It's not going to improve the quality of play.
Our group is a little too pansy ass for that.
Well, all I'm saying is if you could find a way to positively reinforce attentive role playing and studious attention to the plot of the game, that is something I would definitely suggest trying to do. I mean, I'm not sure if it would be a reward in points, or if just something where the players can see that each time basically each time you need to re-explain something to them, maybe they lose one of their bonus benefit points or whatever it is that you're trying to give them, and each time that they, that everybody's on the same page right away, you maybe give them a little something. Again, it's something I'd have to develop a lot more to really go anywhere with it. But
yeah, it's like I think that's that's a long running truth that is held for humans basically forever. That if you positively reinforce somebody, it's always going to stick better. At least for the vast majority of people, it's going to stick better. It's like that's something that will become like taking turns fast. In combat, it sort of became more automatic after that. Where I was like, oh yeah, we should be taking turns fast. Why aren't we doing that?
And I think that was in a 4th edition game, wasn't it? When you introduced that,
yeah.
And I feel like that was one of those games where it sort of felt like its own reward to be going at like lightning speed.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
I felt very proud to have my character like ready to take his action, pass the turn.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just
get back to the role playing.
One of those things where I can sort of see where negative reinforcement in certain situations might get your point across, but at the same time, the point that you're making to the players at that point is that they are not having fun. And so you don't ever want to reinforce that this isn't fun anymore. Even
I
if
had
it's
a GM.
Yeah.
I had a GM who actually did something similar to that. They called them gold stars, and they would give gold stars to players who.
Second grade.
Yeah, he'd give gold stars to players who paid attention well, took their turn regularly, or came up with especially ingenious responses to plot or character scenarios. And you wouldn't usually get one every session. You'd get one every couple of sessions, but then you could spend a gold star for a free reroll of any die.
Oh, that's cool.
So he would reward you for that type of behavior intermittently.
Yeah.
But it's not really a stacking reward. It's just kind of a, tertiary. If someone never got a gold star, they're not like screwed.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
They'll be thinking the whole time, maybe I should be trying harder.
I mean, that's why that XP thing I did was such a racket, because it was what the entire party would get the benefit or not. So really, it wasn't. There was no punishment involved, so it wasn't really. Compared to the other players, you didn't get any more or less.
I think for a global reward like extra XP, I think that it really behooves you to give that to everyone or to no one. But for something that's more of a floating benefit, like the gold stars Rory was talking about, or I don't know if you're using a system that has something like action points or force points or hero points, or a lot of games are including those sorts of benefits now. Bennies if you play Savage Worlds, or Fate points if you play Fate. Basically, tons of systems use these, and it's like, it's a point that you can give someone for being good, and it won't really, skew the overall play, but I think that a bigger benefit is like extra XP or extra points of whatever more permanent kind is good, but I really think that is something that is best saved for the entire group if they are all on the same page about, keeping things keeping attentive, keeping things going, making the gameplay fun for everybody. If everybody's participating, you can give that to them.
Mm-hmm.
The only downside I see with that is like you were saying, we sunk our teeth into that benefit really hard. We wanted it. We always tried to get it. Even when it didn't always work out, we always got it. And XP
is the only thing better than loot.
I sort of feel like you offer that sort of thing up, and the first session you offer it up, and nobody really goes for it, so you're like, you make a point of I'm not giving you the bonus points this session, and then everybody's just like, what a dick.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just sort of feels like it is basically an illusion that you're asking everybody to participate in with you.
Mm.
This has...
If it serves as a little reminder, that's cool.
That
works. That's cool.
This has value, which we are all making up and believing in together.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, I love pretend value.
200%.
Pretend value in a pretend world is like meta. It's meta pretend. It's incredible. It's really like mind control. It's like the coolest thing.
I think that this episode might be starting to get a little bit meta. So I think that we are going to wrap it up pretty soon here. Is there anything else just anybody's itching to say about big groups?
No.
Nope.
No.
I said my piece.
Yeah.
All right.
Did my time. Let's move on.
Yeah, I guess I'd say it's not all bad. They're worth a try, but it's
they're good.
I would say maybe it's
Especially for short duration campaigns or one shots. I found them to be really effective.
Nice.
If you're planning on running a long duration campaign with a big group, pick your group and pick the game type wisely.
They're hard for everyone to be a part of, though.
If you're
know what you're getting into.
If you're planning on running a long duration game with a large group, maybe think about what the next game you're going to play is, because that one's...
or who actually are your friends.
Take showers, deodorant, buy plenty of snacks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Plenty of
Consider
snacks.
buying your friends deodorant.
If people have food at these large gatherings, they will pay attention more. I'm just seriously.
Fatten up your player base.
They'll spend less time chattering because they're putting food in their mouths.
We're from Minnesota, so fatten up your player base. We know what's going on here.
We like it. Tasty.
Yeah.
Food is good.
All right. Well, we are done.
That was a good note to end on.
Yeah.
I'm finished.
Food good. Bye. Food good. Bye.